This is an explosive CG film directed by the director of District 9. Without further ado, the story begins. In 1969, during the Vietnam War, when Sergeant Hines leads his team and encounters supernatural events, helicopters and tanks are disassembled and float in the air, while countless people form a circle in the sky, with over 15,000 mysteriously dying. A Vietnamese villager recalls that after his lover went to the rice fields and began to pray, everything started to float into the sky, and he believed this was a vision of entering heaven. A year later, Sergeant Hines was fighting alone. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing sound came from a nearby cave. He suspected that this was the secret base of the river god, so he quietly infiltrated the cave. After navigating through the dark tunnel, he discovered that it was a bunker, where he could hear a terrifying sound ahead. A dazed soldier marched forward, his face filled with murderous intent, charging at them like a madman, completely unafraid of any attack. What should have been a lethal assault had no effect on him. Seeing this, Sergeant Hines threw a grenade at him. But the opponent not only survived the explosion, but also transformed into another terrifying creature. Without saying a word, it charged towards Sergeant Hines. CIA agent Jacob and Sergeant Carl were dispatched to support Sergeant Hines, as all of Hines's team had been killed by the river god 3 days prior. The three of them must work together to eliminate the river god and rescue the survivors. Jacob established the 4th Firepower bunker base at the Cambodia border outside Xining to track the river god. Upon arriving at the bunker, Jacob met Major Brixton, who asked Jacob to tell him more about the situation. Not long ago, they had suffered a devastating ambush in the woods, and they had no idea what the enemy was. It looked like something out of a nightmare. The remaining survivors, who cannot be killed by gunfire, plan to retreat to Tarfield Base, which is also quickly overrun. Brixton requests airstrikes to burn the entire jungle to the ground, but even that cannot kill the monster. He does not flee, and feels no pain, appearing like a demon with flames engulfing him. This is very unreasonable for the Colonel, as it is a classified incident, and Jacob has not informed him of what it is. The Colonel advises Jacob to provide an explanation to his bloodied subordinates, otherwise, Jacob will face a mutiny. Jacob takes Sergeant Hines to meet Bracken, who was involved in the Tarfield Base incident. The only normal person among them was also seriously injured. He detailed the events that transpired. At that time, they were investigating an abnormal situation, and saw some strange floating objects by the river, not knowing what they were. Upon returning, they encountered an ambush, and were suppressed by the enemy. Just as someone was sacrificing themselves, he felt as if the blood in his body was being sucked out by something, and Bracken could not explain this situation. Then, a monster appeared before him, its skeletal structure controlling fragments that enveloped its entire body, forming a battle armor that seemed to have overwhelming attack power. It slowly approached Bracken. He realized that he was the river god spoken of by the locals. One moment, Bracken was locking eyes with him, and the next moment, he found himself transported to Southern California. On the day they were about to be dispatched for a mission, he witnessed the planes heading to Vietnam being destroyed, and a Soviet aircraft, unlike anything he had ever seen, landed in front of him. Its nose was highly advanced and could transform, and it instantly spewed flames, obliterating everything in its path. The flames were like propane bombs, resulting in the complete annihilation of his team. There was also a massive battle tank. Bracken wondered if this incident had occurred at the Air Force Base. But in reality, it was the Air Force Base. Everything is safe. What Bracken saw might have been an immersive illusion, and he was severely injured in the illusion, believing it to be real. Then, he returned to the Tarfield Base in Vietnam, still enveloped in a ghostly white flame. He entered the river to extinguish the flames, and saw his comrades, who, although alive, were wandering like ghosts around Jacob and Sergeant Hines. After receiving the intelligence, a loud rumbling echoed in Hines's mind, and just as he was taking his medication, it seemed he saw the river water through the mirror, and his expression turned fierce and menacing. Now he only wants to avenge his fallen brothers. Jacob tells Sergeant Hines that the river god is not a Viet Cong soldier, but an ordinary local villager. His once happy family, with a wife and children, was lost amidst the chaos of war, leaving him in unbearable pain. In his extreme sorrow, this villager transformed into a being that destroyed everything around him. Locals who knew him began to call him the river god. He wandered around the Mekong River, destroying many things, perhaps having lost his sanity and not knowing what he was doing, transforming into a monster that only knew how to kill, releasing the pain buried in his subconscious and turning everything he encountered into hell. He wandered into the military base seeking help, at which point his body was nearly burned to ashes. The military doctor began to treat him, and suddenly he seemed to regain consciousness, filled with hatred for everything. He raised his claw and used telekinesis to control the tools nearby. Later, the river god began to act with awareness, launching counterattacks against the invaders. He could use telepathy, making it impossible for any attacks to hit him. He could become invisible in an instant, rendering his enemies unable to see him, and with just a thought, he could control everything. In his presence, humans were as weak and helpless as ants. Jacob devised a plan to set fire to the forest where the river god resided until they found him. He brought out an electromagnetic field gun, whose ammunition could fire beams at 1/20th of the power, along with one electromagnetic field shooter for each person. In order to ensure the integrity of the relative spacetime, after equipping himself, Sergeant Hines is surrounded by a transparent barrier, known as the relative spacetime capsule. Hines and his teammates embark on their mission to confront the river god, and the story abruptly ends here.